Time to hear our first presentation. There you go.
All right, as you guys can see, that I did my presentation higher Akinopolis. I can't even really pronounce it, but there it is for you guys. What is it? So basically, it was the religious and political capital of Upper Egypt during the prehistoric period, before the early dynastic period, or at least the first Old Kingdom period. And it basically took place from 3200 BC to 3100 BC. And it is one of the most important early archaeological sites of ancient Egypt. It can date back to 4000 BC when Egyptian civilization was beginning. It didn't really have much significance at that time, but that's when it was beginning to come about. It's also named Nekhen. I know there's a lot of sites that I've done lately that have different names, so it can be kind of confusing when you do research and stuff like on this. But here's basically some archaeological ruins of the site that I came up with. Obviously, there's not too much, but at least you can see that there's something there at one point. Here is a map of where it was located. It basically takes right just before Edfu, past Luxor, right there, and not too far from not from the Nile. This is the
Red Sea.
Red Sea. Okay.
And the Nile. Very close to the Nile.
Yes. Stuff that they found inside this place, possibly 3500 to 3200 BC, is one of the oldest paintings in an ancient Egyptian tomb. So I think this was painted, looks like, from the early prehistoric era, because from a lot of paintings that I've seen, this looks a lot older than some of those too. You know, just the way it's like description, it doesn't look very clear at all. So
yeah.
It looks like it's going way back.
Okay, it came from a children's book.
Yes, it does. When was the city found? It was basically discovered in the 19th century by these two individuals right here, but the excavation was very poorly done, so it wasn't able to really continue. But what they found for certain was the foundation for the deposit underneath the temple. So they basically started the exploration of the site, but it was not finished until much later. One last thing here is I want to show you guys one of the early paintings that was done there and how it was probably done. So this could probably be show for even other Egyptian tombs that you might see, like how they went about painting.
With the grid.
What do you mean by the grid?
See, they put up the sort of plaster, and then they have dotted lines for a grid.
Okay. Yeah.
You can see that in some tombs. You can still see a bit of the gridding. That's how they would get the size correct. It's easier to draw. Like, let's say you were going to draw and you had a piece of graph paper. It would be easier to draw something in the right, or close to the right scale, if you had it with the graph paper already has the grid lines on it.
Oh, you mean like it has the outline basically?
Yes, so you can see it there. It has left, up and right, left, you see the dotted lines?
Okay.
That's the grid, and then you can say, okay, we want this one to be at the same eye level and have it proportional. By doing it that way, it's easier.
Okay.
I'll let you.
No, that's fine. I think it also kind of helps demonstrate how they saw certain people that were higher than others, because obviously you can see even this guy standing up here, he's not anywhere close to eye level. And I know from some of the research or video assignments that we've had it done, sometimes they've wanted the pharaoh to be seen as this tall and mighty, powerful person, towering over certain things. So this is probably one other reason why they show them taller than most of the people here.
Yeah, tall people are always more powerful.
Yeah, they want to tower over people.
That's right.
All right, that is basically all that I have for that, I believe.
It's not going forward?
It's not going forward, and it's the last slide.
What did you do? All right, I'll come back and see what we can do. But you got more of them, right?
No, that's the last slide right there.
That's the last slide?
Yes.
Well, if that's the last slide, then it's not going to go forward.
Oh,
what are you trying to make it to do?
Just say, like, that's the end or something normal.
Oh, so that is the end.
Okay. Any questions?
I brought a presentation through my phone. It's actually a link to like an online version of it. It shouldn't be through like a download or anything. It's just
All right.
so we have
All right, we'll try it in a minute. All right, here's our next presentation.
Yeah, I did Dorganardi, and I seem to have a
How do you
bad-
say that again?
Dorganardi?
Dorganardi?
I seem to have a bad habit of picking bad places.
What?
The
Do you think this is a bad place?
I like Morea compared to this.
Oh,
Yeah.
you
The
didn't
first
like that one much.
there was information on it.
All right, let's see what you found
Yeah.
out.
So there's some background, very little background is what I found. It's on the northern end of the Second Cataract in Lower Nubia. It was an island fortress. You can see this big green circle, and you can see it's in there, the Second Cataract. There's a faint blue line. I don't know if you can make it out, but it's right north of that.
Second cataract.
Second Cataract. Early belief was that it was occupied somewhere between the middle of the New Kingdom, but no more recent, I say recent as in 1992, proposes occupation from the mid-7th to late 5th century, so this would have been around the 20th.
So they're changing it from the New Kingdom all the way up to the mid-7th century?
Yeah.
That's quite a change.
Yeah. From the 26th to 27th dynasties during the late period.
That's
And
very late.
The 26th would have been the Kushite / Sate, or Sati,
State.
and the 27th is Persian period. So, the brief history of the excavations there. It was first excavated in January 1964 by the Oriental Institute of U of C, and the director of this whole thing was James Knutstad.
Or Knutstad.
Knutstad,
Knutstad.
possibly.
That's not how they say it.
Yeah.
Or just, yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. His supervisor, or looking over the whole thing, it started with about 100 or 50 people and expanded to about 100 people helping out with this. But the supervisor was a man named Richard Pierce. It was part of UNESCO's High Dam campaign.
Aha!
Now, this was right after the Aswan Dam was built.
Right.
And the problem was that, keep in mind, the Aswan Dam is north of this. Water flows south to north with the Nile. Now they build the dam and the water level starts rising. And
Yes.
so early June they had to stop excavating because the water level started rising. Now,
So we're not going to go back and retest it anytime soon.
no.
Unless you do underwater archaeology.
I looked on Google Maps to see, they even gave a specific location, like in terms of latitude, longitude. I looked it up on Google Maps, I searched the whole area, I could not find it anywhere. I thought I found an island that resembled this with a land bridge connecting to the riverbed, but I can't find anything. I don't know what, it's probably underwater. I don't even know at this
Imagine
point.
it is.
So that was very frustrating, spending all that time trying to find it where there's no pictures of it, there's no Google imagery of it.
You
I
see
can't-
now this points out the urgency to take good records.
Yes.
Because, you know, sometimes you may assume, well, somebody will come back in 50 years, 100 years,
Yeah.
or whatever, and take a look at it. But with this, what's sometimes called rescue archaeology, or salvage archaeology, some people don't like to use that word. Salvage, you're trying to salvage what you can get, or rescue it from destruction. And often in the Middle East like this, it is because somebody built a dam. It's like this in Turkey, in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt. We can name examples, and this one was a big one. This UNESCO project, they're starting kind of late in 1964. That had started probably 4 or 5 years earlier.
Yeah, I think 1959 is when
Yeah.
the whole campaign started.
So, you know, and they excavated a lot of sites, and a lot of money got poured into trying to excavate during that period because they knew the construction of the high dam at Aswan was going to flood hundreds, probably thousands of sites. All right.
Yeah. So, not much in terms of time that they could spend.
They have a
excavating.
stone glacis, however.
Yes, I noticed that. I saw a glacis. Like, oh, we learned what that is.
I think you learned about that in medieval history.
Yeah.
But you have it in ancient times too. It's a French word, of course. It means a rampart, usually up next to a wall, like you see there, to help keep somebody from digging under the wall. And even as they're approaching the wall to go over the wall, it's on an angle. So if it's on a slope, it makes it harder to maneuver.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the entire island. I don't think it is. I think it's just part of it, and the island is something else. And also, I don't see any orientation, and it was very difficult figuring out.
Well, what's that thing to the left there? Upper left-hand corner, there's like a cross mark.
I don't know what that is.
I think that's your north arrow. It's hard to read it, though,
Yeah.
from here. But my
That
guess
might
would
be.
be that's your directional arrow.
Okay. Yeah, so archaeological finds, which I couldn't find any pictures. There were no pictures that I found.
No pictures.
At first, I thought it was too ruinous from being scoured underwater for them to excavate it, because this was starting so late. But 60 to 70% actually was mapped before they had to abandon the excavation. There's a lot of pottery, from what I understand. There were some tools, some small weapons. There were a lot of jars and bowls, and they specifically pointed out they were either marl or silt. And they also had a lot of imported pottery. I would have liked to have pictures. There were no pictures.
Where are the pictures?
The closest thing I had was a sketch done in a lady's dissertation
Okay.
of a bunch of different pieces. The only way I could have done that was print screen, but the way it was I couldn't get a good enough picture with the with where I was zoomed in at 100%, so I had to zoom out. But the
All right.
moment I did that, the entire dissertation went blank, so I couldn't get any good pictures. It was sad.
Well, you know what you do then in that case? It's just a suggestion for someone who's perhaps done more piracy than you. Just get it on your screen, take a picture of it with your phone. Then you got a picture.
But the problem
And you can
is,
edit the picture and bring it into PowerPoint.
well,
It's all right. I don't know. It may be illegal.
Yeah.
The whole thing may be illegal. This whole class is probably illegal.
probably is. It's focused on grave robbing. I mean, it's
Yeah, we're robbing grave.
yeah. So
Lisa,
Lisa A. Heidern. That was pretty much.
that was her dissertation.
That was where anything came from. That,
Really?
and I think maybe one other source that was most likely based off of her dissertation was all that I could find on
Well, you
this.
know why? I'll tell you why. Probably. Is because you got this information from, like, what'd you say, 1963?
She did her dissertation in 1992.
Okay. Because when you do a dissertation, it has to be about something no one else has done it on. You have to have something unique. You can't just do what other people have done. So probably, my guess is, I don't know. I'm like, Johnny Carson, you probably know who he is. He used to have a character that he would be like a Swami, he'd be like a guy who could be fortune teller. Having never seen this dissertation, my guess is it's from the University of Chicago, her PhD.
Yep.
And so she is looking for a dissertation topic. A lot of stuff is taken, and somebody says, hey, we did this thing like 30-some years ago. Nobody's ever done anything with it because it only lasted a short time and it was flooded out. This is a perfect thing for a dissertation. Why? Nobody can check anything you're doing. Nobody can go back later on and say, oh, you did that wrong. We're going to check it, see what we found. Plus, nobody else has access to it because the University of Chicago has all the information.
Yep.
You're now a PhD student there. You have some professor there who says, hey, you can look at this stuff. And you do. And you get your PhD after your name. And then you go get a job and you live happily ever after, just like all the rest of the PhDs in the world.
I think I learned more about scheming than the actual site itself here.
Well, you know, this is an educational system. I'm just here to teach you what I can teach you. Sometimes it's about ancient Egypt, sometimes it's about modern academics.
Okay.
But I do like what this guy did. Why did you pick this picture of the guy smashing his computer
Incredible frustration.
with doing this site?
Because I wanted so badly to find something about this place. I couldn't
Yeah.
find anything other than this lady's dissertation. And even though she had a chock full of information,
Well, there you
which
go.
I couldn't verify, like you said, because where am I
Just
going
have
to
to take
find
her word
it?
for it.
Yeah. That was pretty much the only real reliable source, other than one website, probably based off of her dissertation. They could barely excavate it for a few months, and even the pottery that they found that was local, they haven't done any excavations or very little of nearby sites, so they can't compare the pottery.
Because it's Nubian.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. This is a very remote area to start off with, and then you flooded it.
Yeah.
Perfect for a dissertation. I applaud her in her choice.
It was a good 250 pages.
See?
About 50 of that was just pictures, though.
Which you could have had access to had you used my trick.
Yes, but, well, I could have print screen, copied and
You know what?
pasted.
No, you could, but you see, that messed you up.
Yeah.
So you just take a picture with your phone, right? Then you go to your pictures and you press upload, and you send it to yourself, let's say, as an email. Then you bring the email in, you write into your PowerPoint. Got your pictures. I'm just saying. So this is it. This is where you could get to her dissertation.
Top one was her dissertation, the other one was just based off of her
The
dissertation.
fortress, Lower Nubia, 7th to 5th century. See, this is the other thing, too. When they switch it from the 7th to the 5th century, not as many people are interested in it. Most Egyptologists like the earlier stuff. I know I'm speaking in generalities, but it is the Monday before Thanksgiving. All right, well, thank you. Any questions? Soon you'll be semi-comatose on the couch. Let's give him a round of applause for a noble effort. I think it's about another site.
All right, so this is the Dakhla Oasis.
The Oasis.
And then I found this quote, and it kind of gives a good picture of what it is. In this tiny island of green, with its shifting border of deadly sand, verdant farms, and buried water, rests the whole of human history and its future.
Wow,
So,
that's quite a statement.
what I have found is that it is, people have been settled there for what they think is 12,000 years. So, and there are still people there. It is partitioned by sand dunes and supports 75,000 people living in 14 settlements. The main one is in the capital, Mut, which was, we've talked about that a lot before, but so I'll briefly go over it later so it's not too redundant. And then the two main roads are the Farafra and Karga. Most people congregate in Mut, like I said, it's the capital, and the Dakhlans have now, that's what they call them, from the Dakhla Oasis, so they're called the Dakhlans. The Dakhlans have now planted new crops and made the best of the new valley developments. There's also Islamic architecture there and antiques, and recently, this year, they actually think they found fossil remains of a dinosaur, so that's
Do
interesting.
you have a map of it zoomed out?
Of Mut? I honestly can't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. I made this last week, so there's Mut, and I know it's in the middle of, so if this is Egypt, it's
Yeah.
literally right in the middle.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Ancient history of the Oasis.
See how verdant it is.
Well, it's interesting though because the roads are very dry, but then in the middle where the oasis is, it's very vibrant and yeah. Over 100 cemeteries found by the Dakhla Oasis project, which I was going to click on. Is that okay if I do that?
You could try it, see
Okay.
if it works. Otherwise, we'll go to it in a moment. Try
Okay.
it, see if it works. I don't.
They began their research in 1978 and they're still functioning. And the oasis covers a span of time from the Old Kingdom to when it was occupied by Rome, and they actually also found remains of an Islamic civilization that went in they took over the Roman.
Sure. It looks like it's
ruins.
clickable. So let's see what happens.
There was just a lot on here, so I thought you guys could pick what you wanted me to click on. And because I didn't want to take, so whichever one looks interesting to you guys, we can click on it. But there's paleontology, the space agency that comes to DACLA.
We'll let people scroll down and let's see if they can. Manichaeism. We got a lot of stuff here. Christianity.
Yeah, they do a lot of research. So I had a hard time picking, so I was like, I'll just let the people pick what they're interested in.
Conservation. We haven't really talked much about conservation. Let's see what it says.
Okay.
So this is where conservation of the artifacts. Over time, things begin to flake off. They're on a wall, begin to flake off. So if you scroll down, I think it shows the guy.
They put it back together.
They have actually probably cut that thing behind him. My guess is they probably cut the stuff off the wall. I'm just guessing here. Because what they usually do is they would probably put a kind of like a cheesecloth sort of thing over it and glue it on there with a special kind of glue, and then cut, and then transport it in squares, and then bring it back. See, this stuff was smashed. So look at this. Talk about a jigsaw puzzle. So try to put it together, the stuff that fell off the side and smashed, however it was smashed. It might have been by earthquake activity. Let's see, actively conserving sandstone buildings. Yeah, those are going to fall apart. Mud bricks, that falls apart. Painted plaster wall, that falls apart. Ceramic, that breaks. Glass, etc.
So when they restore these, do they use like newer techniques, or do they try to recreate the old?
I think they try to use new materials, special kind of glue they don't think will mess it up. Donate, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was also going to say that this project runs off of donations. And then when I realized that there were like different projects that are hired to go in and excavate, that people, they probably run off of donations.
Well,
like,
here's the thing. For example, like I would like to start an excavation from Southeastern University to someplace in Israel or Jordan. What stops me from doing that? Only two things: time and money. Mostly money. Yeah. In other words, if there was money, it takes a lot of money to do this. And then where do you get that money? So the universities, not just this one, all universities are reluctant to pump a lot of money into something,
Then if you don't find anything, then...
Well, even if you do find something, what is the tangible result? Maybe publicity? Are you going to get more students because of it? Maybe a few. Are you going to get some publicity? Maybe. But I mean, the bottom line, you want to build a new building or build something else or fund an excavation. Most universities say, look, we're going to go with physical needs and
parking spaces.
Now, see, this is being recorded, so
the parking's all the way in Israel. That's what you're excavating.
All right, we better move on.
Okay, so I found not a lot of information on the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale. I didn't find a ton of information on them, but their name kept popping up that they were involved. So I think the DACLA Oasis Project and the Institute have a partnership, and they send their things to the Archaeology Institute.
It often is the case. You'll start a project and typically you'd have a main institution behind it, like let's say a university, and then other institutions might join. Yeah. Universities, and in this case, the French Institute of Oriental Archaeology or Near Eastern Archaeology, and then maybe others. And then what they do is they kick in some money. So if you get, like, say, 5 institutions, colleges, universities, all kicking in $25,000 or something, then you end up with, $125,000 to work with for a season.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it's expensive to dig. All right.
So they found they believe it was the Old Kingdom capital that they found, among other things, but that was like the biggest. And then there's also belief that there were Greek influences there because of the Ptolemaic structures that are found in the buildings. And that's my references.
Very good. Very good. Any additional comments, questions, salutations, greetings? Everyone seems of another site.
Thank you. So, my site was Antinopolis. I've actually seen this spelled 1,000 different ways, with like the secondary O would be like an E with 2 umlauts over it, or a U with like a weird dash through it. And it has to do with the Greek name that it comes after. Oh, by the way, this was hard to research because there is very little academic documentation about this and a lot of, let's say, political documentation about this. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So, Antinopolis was named after Hadrian's Greek boy lover.
Wait a minute. Antinous.
Yes.
Never heard of it.
Oh. So, it's located in the northern area of Upper Egypt. Now, that's kind of complicated to think about because...
In the what? What did you say that?
Northern area of Upper Egypt.
The northern area of Upper Egypt. Okay.
So, let's just say the middle.
So this is like northern South Dakota.
Yeah. So, now there actually is evidence that this area has existed since around like the First Dynasty, 3100 BC, but that's mainly in a connection to like a vague reference to the Egyptian god Besa, and there was a cult of Besa there at the time, but there's like almost no other information about it. There's no like temples to Besa or anything found. It's just like a few documents that just like list it. They do have some evidence of settlement around there, so it's not too unknown that there were Egyptians living there, but most of it has to do with the Greek involvement there. So the actual like width and length of the layout of Antinopolis is kind of hard to determine because there was so much erosion and so much lost material. But it is actually believed to be roughly about the same size as El Sheikh Ibada, which is the current city, the current town that lives there. And they know this because around here is the road of Antinopolis, I think, if I remember correctly, where they have like pillars set up along to guide travelers. And over here there would have been a Greek circus with like a chariot race area. Or maybe it's over here. It's one of these two hooks.
Okay. Interesting.
So, once again, many of the materials that were used to build Antinopolis were sort of repurposed after a few hundred years, I think, for other projects. And there have been some ancient Egyptian tombs found, but they weren't like giant royalty or anything particularly important. Most of Antinopolis is Greek design when they find anything, or at least it was before everything sort of eroded away. Now, something that you can actually still see to this day is the Greek roadways. They would have a lot of four-way intersections, which at the time were unique to Greek design. And
That's where you had your sun pass.
yeah. It later became a place for Christian anchorites, which are basically these hermetic societies that would leave and try to avoid the influences of other groups to try to, I guess, maintain their worship as best they could. So, the history of excavation, most of it, the most important aspect of it was done by Albert Gayet in like the late 1800s. He is pretty much the only person to have ever excavated it, now that I think about it. I haven't seen any new information come out about it recently. And he was super important to this because since so few of the Antinopolis structures remain, his documentation is pretty much the only thing we have left about how it actually was in the 1800s. This is it's called the Arch of Triumph, and it is much worse today. Like if you were to see a picture today, it would only be these pillars. It's like it's just missing everything, and that was one of the reasons it's kind of hard to view this. And sort of that's my presentation, but sort of a side note, it was very difficult to research this from a documentation point of view because almost all of it is actually information provided about it nowadays is from a cult of Antinopolis online, like a literal cult online, modern cult. That
When did you join?
No, I did not join this one, trust me. And it's dedicated to the worship of Antinous, as he was deified by Hadrian after he died.
So this is a cult of Antinous, the friend of Hadrian.
Yes, the friend of Hadrian.
You know, he died,
Drowned in the Nile.
drowned in the Nile. So perhaps that's all related.
Maybe.
Wow. Antinous. He just keeps coming up. I can't get away from him. There's a lot of statues of him, by the way, as well. He's all over the place. All right.